You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I'm answering 2 questions from Joy in Maryland. And one is about slime, and one is about when we might refer out to another type of therapy. So very unrelated questions, but both helpful. So we'll dive into each. I'll read one at a time so we can kind of answer each one separately. And Joy, thank you so much for the email. So the first question about slime, I have some kids who play with slime for the majority of the session. I track and reflect and behave as I do in any other play session, but I do not notice as many themes during this play. Is this common? Am I missing something? Do you say or doing anything differently when working with slime? We never say or do anything differently regardless of what's going on in a CCPT playroom. So that's an easy answer. No, never. Never with exclamation points in capitals. We never change anything regardless of what's happening. That's the beauty of the model. We remain adherent and it's consistent and it's effective. So regardless of themes or no themes, play being the same, play being different, child presenting with XYZ, it doesn't matter. We're always consistent across the board. Kids that play with slime. God love all of you who have slime in your room. I cannot. So if you all are slime CCPTs, here's a high five from the girl in Florida that says no way. I don't have any slime in my room, but I know lots of you all do. When a child comes in and plays with slime, it's almost always in competence theme. But hold on. Let's back the train up for a second. We have to be mindful. Just because a child plays with something one time does not make it a theme. It needs to be consistent within sessions and across sessions. So it would be symbolic if it's just a one-time scenario. If it presents itself multiple times within session and across sessions, now we know it is themed. So just be aware, sometimes we say, oh, what theme is that? Because something emerges. We can't assume that it's a theme. There has to be consistency there. Okay, so now we can keep going down the track. For those kids that come in and play with slime, it's almost always competence-based. Now, it can be rooted in some different things. Sometimes it's because they just want to show their mastery and they're proving that they're competent. Sometimes it's self-challenging. They've never done it before, so they want to prove that they can. Sometimes it's safe. They're used to doing slime at home, so especially early on in sessions, you will see a child that might come in and gravitate towards something that requires nothing but comfort. I know how to do slime. Slime is easy. Slime is predictable. Nothing in my unconscious is going to come up that I'm not ready for or prepared for. Slime is safe. That's another reason sometimes kids will consistently play with slime. It is usually a temporary segment of play. Kids will not play with slime forever. That's a temporary snippet in the process. So the intention is we reflect, we track, we remain present, we remain engaged. We wait to see what unfolds. If you notice shifts taking place, we can point those out. We also want to be mindful of paying attention to anything that changes. So wherein maybe it used to be 30 or 35 minutes of the session, we played with slime. At some point, it may reduce to 10 or 15 minutes. That's noteworthy. The need isn't as strong. The compulsion to do that is not overriding the whole session. It's just, I still want to do it. I still need to do it, but I don't need to devote as much time. So when we see that very consistent repetitive play, we're always looking for what is changing. Is the child more free and uninhibited? Maybe the child is willing to mix glitter or colors or something, whereas before there was a lot of rigidity. We're always looking for the subtle changes. That's one of the things that we're able to observe, change, and growth. So I hope that addresses the slime question. As far as specific modalities, let's dive into that question. So let me read parts of the email. If a child has a specific phobia, would you refer them to ERP therapy in addition to play therapy, or just provide toys? And in this case, the reference was specifically to emetophobia. Do we provide specific toys such as throw up in a doctor kit for them to work through it on their own? I wonder the same thing about whether to trust CCPT for trauma or when to refer to EMDR. Are there situations in which you would add or refer for another type of therapy? Generally speaking, I'll get back to the specific phobia in a second, but let's talk about, for example, referring to EMDR. General rule, we change one thing at a time. If a parent pursues CCPT, that needs to be the only difference. Because as soon as you introduce a different type of therapy, for example, causality goes out the window. We want to try to mitigate the amount of change as much as possible. Parents say, hey, I really think my child needs therapy. There's a lot of trauma. This happened, whatever. CCPT is effective with trauma. And we certainly wouldn't want to introduce something else because then at that point, what's causing change? We don't even know. Too many variables. Second consideration is we don't ever want the child to be overwhelmed with too much therapy. And that very much happens. So if they're in CCPT, that is emotionally draining. It's psychologically draining. It's mentally draining. It's physically draining. Then sending them to a different type of therapy, that's going to be so much for a child to manage. And that is unethical at that point. We don't want to put a child in a compromised state where they can't attend to either therapy because it's just too much. So again, we're always trying to say one thing at a time. My standard in a scenario like that would be, let's do an entire round of CCPT. We know that CCPT is effective for trauma. And if we get to the end and we feel like maybe we need to pursue something else, we can talk about that. And I rarely, if ever, have anyone that still pursues something else after CCPT because CCPT is effective. Getting back to specific phobias. Phobia is just an irrational fear and an overwhelming level of anxiety. So we treat that no differently than any other anxiety-based presentation. We would not refer them to something else. We also would not provide specific toys. In other words, I've worked with children with emetophobia. I've worked with children that refused to eat and were failure to thrive because they choked and they said, I will not eat anything anymore. So I played several sessions with a kid with an NG tube taped to his nose and the back of his neck and the tube hanging out of the back of his shirt with a Ziploc bag on it because they'd put in a feeding tube for him. And I mean, these are serious food-related phobias. I had one that had lost, I think, like 16 or 17 pounds because he would only drink something. He would not chew any food. And they're all based in something that happened that was overwhelming and scary. And so then it became a phobia. In those scenarios, I never once put special kinds of toys in the playroom. But kids naturally worked through their food issues. So a standard CCPT playroom has food. A standard CCPT playroom has a doctor's kit. So we would not add anything to the playroom. I wouldn't intentionally put fake throw up in the room because I know that a child is scared of that. I would just let them process things the way that they need to. And the beauty of the playroom is if a child doesn't have what they ideally want, they'll make something work. So you don't have to have throw up for a kid to pretend that something is throw up. And that's why we provide the 3 categories of toys and we trust the process. They will use what they need to in creative and clever ways if it's not present and they have to have it. Otherwise, they don't have to have it and they'll use other things. So the general rule is one thing at a time, no changes. And we do believe and know based on research that CCPT works with phobias and with trauma. Therefore, we're going to trust the child, trust the process, trust the model, and we remain adherent, and kids will work through what they need to. So thank you, Joy, so much for both of those questions. Hope that encourages and helps y'all. If you want to reach out, please do. Brenna at thekidcounselor.com. You can also, if you're in the States, call 813-812-5525, and I will answer a question from your voicemail. Otherwise, have a great week. We'll talk soon. Love y'all. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.